Hi guys, back again, Charlie Black 20. I am doing part 2 to the Sword Art Online Progressive Volume 1. We're doing the Interlude and part 2 where we tackle the reason for the whiskers and Rondo for a fragile blade. Floor 2. We start off with Kirito opening the second floor portal gate that allows the players from the first floor to enter the second floor without having to go through all the dungeons. They can go straight from their towns. And they're on, the town is called Urbis. And Kirito goes and hides on the third floor story of a building as he sees all these players coming through the gate. A lot of them are cheering. Some of them have maps in their hands. He sees a female blacksmith. But Kirito also notices that Argo comes through the gate and takes off pell-mell through the town into the wilderness, soon followed by two other figures who follow her at almost the same speed. And so Kirito follows them using his tracking skills to follow people on his friends list, which Argo is on his friends list. And he overhears them talking and arguing, really. These two guys are demanding that she sell them a piece of information about a extra skill from the beta test that's on the second floor. And she says, no, I'm not selling that piece of information because it's only going to get me hatred in return. I'm not selling it for any price. Things start getting really heated, and Kirito finally just jumps in. He lands between Argo and the two guys, and he recognizes them as the Fuma ninjas, who were beta testers who got a really bad reputation from the original beta because they maxed out their speed skills, but whenever things got hairy on the front lines, they would take off running, usually getting other players killed by monster trains, which is when a huge amount of monsters follow other players and hit the players as they pass by. So not a good reputation. And Kirito, because he's wearing this coat of midnight and he's wearing all this dark armor, they mistake him for maybe a rival from another clan or school, basically. And it looks like they're about to draw their swords on him, which would make them criminals in the game. But he notices something and he says, look out behind you. And there's a Taurus monster behind them, basically a bull on 2 feet. And they take off running for the town. And the monster follows them because it has a very long targeting system. So it won't just go away in a few seconds. So Kirito has saved Argo, basically, for the moment. And she says, that was a little too much showing off, Key Boy, because she's hugging him from behind and putting her head on his back. And she says, keep that up, and you might force Big Sister to break the very first rule of Information Dealer. And he's like, oh my god, what's going on? So he says, you owe me one, remember? I can't have anything happening to you until you explain the reason for your whiskers. And he's referring to the fact that because he had taken all the blame as a quote-unquote beater so other former testers would be safe, she owes him a piece of information free of charge. And she had told him that she would sell him the information of her whiskers for 100,000 coal, which is a lot. So Kirito mentions that, and she says, okay, I'll tell you, just wait so I can get the paint off. And Kirito's like, wait, what does that mean? Is this a symbolic act with deeper meaning, as it says in the book? And he's like, never mind, just tell me about the extra skill they were talking about. And so Argo agrees to tell him about the extra skill, which is basically you can get certain skills by completing certain quests from NPCs. And they have different ways they can be used. Like, the only one Kirito knew about was this one called meditation, which is very much like it sounds, where you can meditate and you can gain certain resistance to, like, paralysis or poison and have maybe some health increase, but it's not very cool, and it takes a while to learn. So Kirito, she makes him promise. Argo makes Kirito promise that he will not hold anything against her if she shares this information, and so he agrees. He swears by the gods of the system that he will not hold it against her. So she leads him through these quote unquote really really small mountains through the second floor, the wilderness. And they're able to avoid a lot of danger, and Kirito's high enough level that the monsters aren't too much of a problem. Until they finally reach this one spot where there is a spring and a single tiny hut. And out of the hut comes an NPC, a very big burly guy, very long beard. And he asks Kirito if he wants to take part in his training for martial arts skill. So if you don't have a weapon, you can use your hands, your feet to fight. So that's why those Fuma guys were wanting it so bad, because as ninjas, that would complete their character build. Because they want to be ninjas, they need to be able to use their hands, their feet, rather than just their swords or shurikens or whatever. So the NPC, the martial artist, tells Kirito that if he accepts his quest, all he has to do is break this rock. But until he does break that rock, he will have his mark upon him. And he takes a paintbrush, the NPC, and wigs it across Kirito's face before he can say no or change his mind. And Argo, he's staring at Argo at that moment, like, what is going on? What happened? And she's holding back a huge laugh. And he realizes, oh, so that's the reason for your whiskers. You found out about this guy from one of your quests, came down here, got the whiskers put on you, couldn't break this rock, which is one notch below immortal object in the game setting. And you just kept your whiskers the whole time, hence the moniker Argo the Rat. And she's like, very good, Key Boy. I'll give you one more piece of information free. That rock is hard as hell. And he's like, well, do the whiskers look good, like yours? And she's like, not exactly the same. More like Kittymon. Which is a character from... It's a reference to a character in Japanese that is just kind of hilarious. And for 3 days, Kirito stays and finally breaks that damn rock. And he says, thank God I didn't have to hate Argo the rest of the game. So that's the interlude, the reason for the whiskers. We go back to Kirito. Again, he's still on the second floor. He's come back to the main town on the second floor called Urbis. And he hears this scream of rage and frustration that says, that makes him very concerned. He's like, is it about me? No, obviously not. So he's approaching the town, and he sees a scene in front of him of this guy waving his sword around in a Neo blade like Kirito's, like, what the heck? And he's screaming at this blacksmith that's a player in blacksmith, telling him, you messed up, you're a failure as a blacksmith, how could you completely ruin my weapon? And Kirito's wearing this really ugly blue and yellow bandana, and behind him he hears, what's going on? Why is that guy so angry? And at first he tries to act like he's an NPC or he's a player who doesn't know her, because it is Asuna. Asuna has shown up. And she says, well, I believe you let me use your farm. And he's like, oh, yeah, right. Hi, Asuna. It's been, 3 days? Not a long time? And Kirito explains to her that the guy with the sword, the reason he's so angry is that the blacksmith has failed to upgrade his weapon. And not only failed to upgrade his weapon, but has decreased the weapon from +4 to +0. So the sword is completely useless as far as upgrade attempts. So I'm going to explain this a little bit. when you get a sword or a weapon, you get upgrade attempts. So if your sword uses up all of its attempts, even whether they're successful or failures, you can only upgrade it that number of attempts. So if it's at +5 and you used all your attempts, 3 of them were failures, it cannot be upgraded any further. So this guy is angry because his +4 Neoblade, the blacksmith tried to upgrade it 4 different times and failed 4 different times. So and not only failed, but actually caused a decrease in his sword. And so the guy is just pissed. He paid some money. He paid money to have this blacksmith do it. He provided him materials, and the statistical likelihood, the percentage points to have a complete failure 4 times in a row is very low, but he just had some bad luck, it seems. Like he gambled and he lost. The blacksmith looks almost like a dwarf, apparently, except that he's clean shaven and everything like that. And he's apologizing. He's very, very unhappy that he seems to have failed. And eventually he offers to compensate the guy to buy the sword. The sword is absolutely useless, but he offers to buy it for about half its value, about 8,000 coal. And a Neoblade, as it is, at +0 and no upgrade attempts, is worth about 16. Is not even worth 16,000 at full capacity. So he's like, "All right, we'll sell it to you. Thank you." Basically, the blacksmith seems to be taking a loss because he failed at his moment. But Kirito has a sneaking suspicion that something is wrong. He'd come to the town to upgrade his sword with the same player, the blacksmith player. And he's like, something in the back of his mind is telling him, if I take my anneal blade up to him now, something bad's going to happen. And Asuna had come to the town for the same reason, for her wind fleuret. She had materials that she had gathered from grinding these monsters, these wasps of some kind. And Kirito, with his feeling the way it is, he's like, something just... He tries to persuade Asuna, listen, don't you prefer 90%, 95% to 80%, which is the likability she's gathered these materials to bring up the likelihood of success for her upgrade attempts. She's got about an 80% chance of success with what she's got so far. So Kirito, because of how he's feeling about this, he says, listen, why don't you aim higher? Aim for the perfection. And get it to 95% chance of success. And Asuna decides to use this opportunity to have him help her, basically. She says, okay, since you're so gung-ho about this, you are going to help me get the rest of the materials. So they have to go back and grind more of these wasps. And Kirito's like, that's not what I meant, but okay, I can't back down now. And they make a bet. Asuna makes a bet with him that whoever can get to 50 kills, 50 monster kills by the end of this, they're aiming for 100, the loser will play for dessert that night. And Kirito realizes, after a while, that, oh my god, the reason she made that bet is because there's this really great tremble shortcake at a certain restaurant that costs a lot. Like, Kirito wasn't even going to buy it for himself. It's so expensive. But he's like, oh no. When he accepted the bet, he didn't think about it. And right now, Kirito is losing by about 2-3 kills with his sword because he has focused on strength and durability on his sword. So he's doing well with his sword as far as inflicting damage. But because Asuna is using her fencing techniques and she's focused on accuracy, she's able to get critical hits at a much better rate than him. And so Kirito pulls out his secret weapon, this martial arts skill, so that he can use his sword and then use his martial arts skills instead of being stuck after using a sword skill. He can use another move with his other hand or his feet to inflict more damage quicker. And it goes on for a few hours until finally they get to the end, and Asuna has beaten Kirito by 1 point. She got 50 compared to his 49. So, I'm sorry, they were to get to 50 first. So she beat him by one monster, and he now has to pay for the dessert. So they go back to Urbis. It's about 7 o'clock at night. Everybody seems to be returning at night now, which Kirito, in his thoughts, comments on that. And so Asuna pays for the dinner and the inn, while Kirito pays for the dessert, which is easily, I think, like 2 or 3 times what the dinner is. And so he pushes it towards her, tells her, enjoy. And she says, oh, I will. And then like 2 seconds later, she bursts out laughing and says, yeah, don't worry. You can have a third of it, okay? And it's like Kirito's doing all these measurements in his head about how much Tremble shortcake he gets to have, because he gets a third of it. And they gobble it down. They've had a very good meal. And Kirito says the shortcake was delicious. They probably fine-tuned the nerve gear so you can taste it more. But they had there's a new thing as well, and he points up to their buff icons. And what he sees is what looks like a 4-leaf clover. So there's a luck bonus that usually you can only get by making a offering at a church, or getting a blessing, or getting really lucky with a drop item. But Kirito says they probably saw the price of that shortcake and decided to add this into it. So it's probably going to last about 15 minutes, this buff. And they're not really sure what to do, because it's way too late to go out grinding monsters and only have a handful. And Kirito doesn't think that Asuna would want to go out into the streets and crawl around looking for very pricey coins. But he hears the anvil, the hammer and anvil, the blacksmith thing. He's like, well, it can't hurt if we go down there to try to use our luck bonus. Like, maybe handing over your weapon when you have the luck bonus might help increase our odds. And so they head over there. He offers them, it turns out the blacksmith name is Nezha. Nezha asks them, are they there for a new weapon, or are they there for armor? He's basically offering to sell them something, but they say he doesn't even mention upgrades. But Asuna hands over her wind fleuret and says, please upgrade this for speed and accuracy. And Nezha looks very disappointed that that's what they want, but he gives it a shot. And Kirito, as soon as Asuna hands over her weapon, he's like, wait, there's something wrong, don't do it, but it's too late. Nezha has started. And if they try to stop it right then and there, it's just going to result in a failure no matter what. So right now, Kirito is calculating in his head, okay, right now with all the materials, all the luck bonus, everything we've done, we probably have about a 97% chance of winning, of getting a successful upgrade. On the 10th hammer, the sword, the wind fleuret, completely, utterly breaks. It shatters into pieces and then pixels. And 2 seconds later, Nezha is jumping up. He's bowing and he's apologizing, saying, I'm so sorry. I can't believe this happened. I'm so sorry. I'll give you all your materials. I'll refund everything. And Asuna is stunned. She can't say anything. So Kirito steps in and reveals to Nezha, listen, I was a beta tester. So what just happened? I don't remember anything in the beta saying that a weapon will be destroyed if you fail an attempt. I've only seen that will either decrease your weapon or it will just fail. What happened? And Nezha, he's looking really nervous, really uncomfortable, but he says, I think they added in one more where your weapon could break if it completely fails. Like there's one more penalty. And Kirito doesn't see how else it could be. He's like, there just doesn't seem to be any other way that could happen unless they added this penalty. But at a 97% success rate or chance of success, how? How did Nezha, who's supposed to be better than the NPC blacksmiths on this floor, how did he manage to fail in such a spectacular way? So Kirito is confused. He's suspicious, but he doesn't really have anything to go on. So Nezha offers to sell them another weapon, like an iron rapier. And Asuna basically just shakes her head, and Kirito says, you gave it your best. You don't need to refund us anything. A lot of blacksmiths just whack away, and they think that'll do it. It doesn't matter how many times, what you feel. And Nezha looks even more depressed at that point. And so he apologizes again. Kirito and Asuna walk away. And eventually, Kirito, who has absolutely no idea what to do, no real social understanding of what to do. Eventually brings Asuna to a bench, has her sit down. He sits down with her for a minute, and he tries to be logical with her, and that, your wind florette was only going to be good for a couple more floors anyway. You were going to have to move on from it eventually. And Asuna says, well, if that's the case, I really don't want to keep going. I thought that with that blade, with her, I could maybe not be so alone. Maybe I could make it. Maybe moving forward together, we could be doing something good. So she's really attached to her sword in a way that she never did with the old iron rapiers she had. Like, she just grabbed a bunch of them and went out into the field. Didn't care about them at all. But for this wind florette, she seems to be very attached. And Kirito's like, well, you know what? There is a way to carry on the soul of your sword. And he explains that with armor and swords, you can melt them down into ingots and reshape a new sword using other swords or other materials so that your sword continues on. At least the bloodline does. And I do that myself for the most part, like with my armor and stuff. But Kirito takes her back to the inn. She goes back to her room, which apparently since they paid together for the inn, they're both connected to the room. But the next chapter starts with Kirito deciding to investigate what's going on. He knows that something is up. He suspects that something in him, his gamer senses are tingling, you could say. So he goes out to follow Nezha, and he does it. He's never been a detective of any kind, but he basically trails him. Nezha goes to packs up his stuff into this. It's called a merchant's carpet, I believe. And he takes it, rolls it up, and goes to an inn where Kirito realizes he's meeting up with a bunch of friends, he pushes open the door a little bit to the inn so he can overhear what's going on, because if he didn't push open the door, he wouldn't be able to hear anything, no matter how good his eavesdropping skill was. So he's listening in, and he hears them celebrating, like, how much money they've made. For the moment, Kirito thinks that he's worrying over nothing. But then he hears Nezha say, I think we should stop. I don't think we can keep going. And the others are getting really quiet now. They're like, we're just raking in the good stuff now. We're finally making good money. We're going to keep going with this. And then Kirito hears them say, wait, what's at the door? And Kirito goes and hides behind a tree, or by a tree. And because he has a hiding skill, he's able to, the players, he's watching how the percentage of how much he's hidden goes down and down and down until finally the guy seems to look away or go back inside, and it shoots back up. So he barely avoids getting caught spying on these players, which in town is considered really bad etiquette. So if you were caught doing that, it would get you a bad reputation, which Kirito's like, I don't know if my reputation could get worse as a beater. But Kirito starts thinking about things, and he's like, something is definitely not adding up. How could he? It seems like he's doing a scam of some kind. Nezha is. And he's doing it with the help or the backing of his friends. So what's going on? And then Kirito has a thought. Wait a minute. There was one moment, just one moment in the upgrade attempt where our eyes were not on Nezha or the sword. Just that one moment, that one maybe 5-second flash between the forge and the sword being upgraded. And so Kirito thinks, wait, and he gets a sudden revelation. And he looks at the time, sees what it is, and dashes back to the inn. It takes him about 3 minutes to run there when it took him about 8 or 10 to follow Nezha. He gets to the inn, knocks, basically, knock on Asuna's door, and says, I'm coming in. And he comes in. Luckily, she's wearing some kind of, like, pajamas, like poofy shorts, shirt. And he's like, listen, never mind everything right now. This is urgent, ultra emergency. And she's like, what? Basically. Like, she's obviously pissed. And he tells her, open up your menu right now. Go through it and let me and make it visual for me. And so she does. And he goes through a bunch of different menus, like a dozen of them or something. And he's seeing, okay, this step is good, this step is good. We're still in the time limit. Let's go, let's go. And then he presses the materialize all items button. Or he has Asuna do it. And a bunch of stuff comes falling out. Clank, boom, 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 boom. And Kirito is a little embarrassed, as well as Asuna being very angry because apparently she's got in her inventory a lot of bras and underwear. And Kirito, being a gentleman, says, "Excuse me," goes through the clothes and pulls from the very bottom the heaviest item that's there and turns around and shows it to Asuna. Before she can really punch him or anything, she sees what it is and she is astonished. It is her wind fleuret. And she's like, what is going on? And so Kirito calms her down and starts to explain. He tells her, listen, what happened was that somehow Nezha switched your sword with a wind fleuret in his inventory that he already had that had no upgrade attempts left, and then switched it for yours. So that's exactly what happened. And Kirito says it was a very, very good scam on his part. He was very smart about it. I don't know exactly how he managed to switch, but he did. And she's like, but how? And Kirito says, listen, in SAO, the settings for ownership, of property ownership, is much more stringent than it is in the real world. For example, my sword here, right now if I drop it, it becomes dropped or abandoned. But it's still equipped to me. It's still my sword unless somebody else picks it up. But if I hand my sword over to somebody, it's still equipped to me, so I still own it. If I hand it over to somebody, that's considered a handoff. So that sword still belongs to me for 3,600 seconds, or 3,600 minutes, I'm sorry. And I have the chance to get that back and make it mine again. But after those 3,600 minutes are up, it no longer belongs to me. So when I came in and told you I needed to see the menu and check the time, we were making sure that that first step was there. And I also checked that you still had yourself equipped to the sword, or you had your sword equipped to you. And so that step was met as well. So then we were able to go through all these menus and use Materialize All. And the reason it's Materialize All, as he explains, is it's a last-ditch effort to get your stuff back if you've lost something. And the reason they make it all the items is to make it inconvenient, and they put it all under all those menus to make it inconvenient. The gamers don't want, the game master or the people who made the game don't want you relying on this to get all your items back. It's like a cheat in that way. So by making it more inconvenient and making it a last-ditch thing, it can be used when you really need to use it. Like, it's like life or death moment, in a way. And so they start their own investigation into Nezha now. Because Nezha is going to realize that the sword is gone from his inventory, that she must have realized that he had scammed them and he had she had pulled the sword out using the Materialize All. So Nezha has to move his base of operations eventually, and he moves to another town. Kirito and Asuna tells him that there's a field boss that is going to be fought by the frontline players, led by Kibao and his team, who are going to be wearing green, and Lind, a player that Kirito doesn't know, and the blue players on his team. They were Diavel's old friends, and Kibao's people are the people that are very against the beta testers, or especially the beaters, like Kirito. And they're tackling what is called the field boss, which is a boss in its own right, but in the field of the floor, where think of it like a midway boss between the towns and the labyrinth dungeon. So Lind and his party of 6 and Kibao and his party of 6 are trying to draw the boss to fight each of their parties. Like they want to fight against the boss by themselves. Kirito and Asuna are spying on them, and Kirito notices 3 new guys who are standing in the background, and he recognizes one of them as the leader of the people that were with Nezha, and the man's name is Orlando. And his 2 friends also have names that are related to legendary heroes, and they call themselves, their team, the Legend Braves. And they've picked their names based off of heroes from history, although they're not sure who Nezha is. They're not sure. And they watch this boss battle go, where both Kibao and Lind are trying to use their team's tanks to draw aggro from the boss and fight them. And and their competition between each other nearly results in some players getting killed. Only the fact that the Legend Braves stepped in and started fighting keeps things from going bad. And eventually Lind gets in the last attack bonus, and his team kills the boss with help from the Legend Braves. And Asuna also shares that they have their new guild names. At least Kibao does, which is the ALS, the Einkrad Liberation Squad. And Lind eventually reveals their name for his team as the Dragon Knights Brigade. So, Kirito asks Argo for a meeting, as well as Asuna does as well, so they can get some information. And they get some food. And Kirito basically asks Argo, I want to pay you to do something, but I need a special request as well. He says, I want you to get every bit of information you can on the Legend Braves, and they can't know who's asking. You can't reveal that I'm asking. Period. And at first Argo seems to hesitate, but then she immediately says, okay, let it be known that Big Sister prioritized her feelings for Keyboy over information dealing. And Asuna is just glaring at Kirito at this point, and Kirito's like, of course, sure, thanks. And Asuna has a question too. Like, she asks, what is the conditions that need to be met for a sword in SAO or an Einkrad to be destroyed in an upgrade attempt? And Argo says, I already know the answer to that. The only way a sword will be broken, completely destroyed, is if you attempt an upgrade on a weapon that's used up all of its upgrade attempts. So basically, any weapon that has used up all of its upgrade attempts, if a blacksmith, whether NPC or player, if they try to do another upgrade, it will fail, regardless, because it has no more attempts. So it will break the weapon. So Kirito and Asuna go to start spying again on Nezha from an upstore window, and they see another player, a frontline player, named Shivata from the Blue Knights Brigade. The Divine Dragon Brigade. And he asks to get his sword, which is called a Stout Brand, upgraded. Good sword, one that Nezha could use in his scam, because he's basically getting a free upgraded weapon for the price of half of for basically nothing. He's scamming them. Basically, he's getting their weapon by destroying a completely useless one and getting a new one that has multiple upgrades that they can sell for a profit. And so he does do this. He tricks Shivata, and he apologizes and everything. And Shivata leaves without too much of a commotion. Like, he's obviously mad, but he doesn't see what else he can do. He thinks that it was just a bad move. And Kirito thinks about telling Shivata about this, but he has no proof at this point, like that Nezha is doing this scam, because all Nezha would have to do is just rematerialize the sword. All he'd have to do is pull it out and give it to Shivata, and no harm done. That's it. So they were watching as he was putting as he was getting ready for his upgrade attempt, Nezha was. And they realized that the one point they missed was when he was throwing the materials into the forge. So they're watching his left hand, and they see him use it in an instant. And Kirito realizes that there's a skill that Nezha is using, and he attempts it himself. It's called quick change. It's where you switch your weapon from one weapon to another in only 2 steps, rather than taking 5 steps through the menu. You do it in 2. You use quick change, and then you select the weapon that you're changing to. Simple. And that he is doing it within about 2 seconds. Maybe less. And Kirito, and the more you upgrade, and you have to, just like with any other skill, like swordsmanship, like your one-handed swords, or your martial arts skills like Kirito has, you have to improve it by points, like you do with Pokemon. You have to upgrade them. You have to grind them out to increase their levels. And that's what Kirito does with the quick change over the next, day, I believe, or the whole night. And then Asuna and him buy this really cheap but effective armor that puts Kirito in a complete full set of mail armor, of plate armor. And he does this as a disguise because he was there when Nezha took the wind fleuret. So he would recognize Kirito if he tried to upgrade his weapon. So Kirito does this. He hands him the sword, and he also sees that Nezha likes that his blade is a good one. And he gives a smile. He's like, yeah, this is a good sword. And then he gets really disappointed. He's like, okay, what do you want it upgraded to? And Nezha tries to do the scam on Kirito, makes the sword seemingly break, and then before he can say sorry, Kirito stops him and says, listen, I understand, don't worry. And he rematerializes using the quick change skill, his sword, and gets rid of all the armor. And Nezha recognizes him, and he's like, I knew I'd get caught, and the only way I can atone is by doing this. And he tries running into the wilderness to get killed by monsters, but Asuna steps between him and says, listen, you're not going to accomplish anything by getting killed. You scammed a bunch of players, yes, out of their money, but you're letting all the other players down if you go out there and commit suicide. That's a crime against all the players. Nezha then says, listen, there's no beating this game. The only thing that's different is when and how we're going to die. And Kirito kind of giggles. And Nezha looks at him really hurt, and he says, listen, I'm not laughing at you. It's just that Asuna here just said those exact same words not that long ago, just a few days ago. And Nezha looks at her like, wait, really? And she's like, yeah. But I've set a goal for myself. I'm not trying to live to beat the game, but I have set a goal. And Kirito's like, what is it? He makes like a joke, like, is it to eat an entire Tremble shortcake again? And she's like, no, it's not. And Nezha, they pull Nezha away to talk to him, where he says, listen, he explains what was going on and that why they did this. He tells them, listen, the reason that we got off to such a late start as the Legend Braves is because I have an FNC. FNC is a full dive nonconformity. It's where you're using the nerve gear, but one of the senses that you have, or multiple senses, like your taste, feel, sight, sound, smell, something is not working quite right with the nerve gear. It could be so bad that you can't even get into the game. But in this case, obviously Nezha got stuck and one of his senses is not working. And it turns out it's his sight, his depth perception, which for a ranged target, like when you have magic or archery, or in this case, the throwing knives in the game, it's not that big a deal. But when it's swordsmanship, using a up-close and personal weapon like most of Sword Art Online does, he can't really tell where the enemy is or where certain things are. And he demonstrates by trying to pick up his cup, and he moves his hand really slow, and only when he touches it with his hand does he pick it up and drink out of it. And so he explains that he didn't want to be left behind by his friends, even though he knew that he was causing them problems, that he was just dead weight in his mind. and that and but he just was too cowardly to cut himself away or to leave or to bring himself to say I should leave. So he became a blacksmith. But again, they've fallen behind the other players, and they've spent a lot of money on his throwing skills and his blacksmithing skills. And so one day, Kirito says, okay, so how did you guys come up with this scam then? It was very brilliant. And the guy says, Nezha says, well, actually, none of us came up with it. It was a guy in a black poncho who just came up to us one day and told us how to do it. The quick change and the blacksmithing skills. And Kirito's like, well, did he want a commission or anything? And the guy's like, well, no, he didn't want anything. He just came up to us and told us. And when we said, well, that's actually not a good idea, we're scamming people. And the guy just laughs, a very pleasant laugh that makes them all go along with it. And they're like, and he says, listen, if the game allows it, then it's not illegal, then it's not wrong. Anything the game allows you to do is good or okay. And Asuna's like, wait, that's ridiculous. You could say that about stealing from other players then, going orange, or even player killing. And so this guy really persuaded them that they could do this. He showed them how to do it. He gave them the information and then just left. And so Kirito realizes that this guy, whoever this was, they had an ulterior motive, whatever it was, that they were trying to cause problems. So Kirito remembers that when he and Asuna had gone into the labyrinth dungeon, where they got a lot of loot and experience, he remembers a weapon that he managed to get in a rare drop. But he has no use for this weapon. But maybe, just maybe, Nezha does. And he says, Nezha, would you be willing to give up being a blacksmith if you could be a frontline fighter? Would you give up on it? And so he tells Nezha how he can become a warrior again. Because that's exactly what Nezha wants. He wants to be on the front lines with his friends. And Kirito and Asuna, I think it's like 3 days later. Yes, about 3 days later. Asuna, Kirito, and all the frontline players, about 3 parties of 6 under Kibao, 3 parties of 6 under Lind, and 3 guys plus Agil, plus Asuna and Kirito, which makes about 40, which makes one, as well as the 5 members of the Legend Braves. Notice 5. Orlando and his 4 friends, minus Nezha. Nezha has not made it yet. They're all there for the boss fight. They've made it to the second floor boss in about, I believe it's 4 or 5 days. And so the ALS and the DKB, which is the acronyms for the 2 guilds, basically, and the Legend Braves, as well as Agil and his bro squad, as Kirito calls them. Agil offers for Asuna and Kirito to join them, because they would then have a full party of 6 at least. Lind wins a coin toss to become the leader of the raid against Kibao. So he's the leader of the raid, and he's dyed his hair blue in honor of Diavel. And at first there's the talk about, they talk about what was in the Argo strategy guide. They lay out what teams are going to be where. So Lind and Kibao are going to fight the main boss, this General Baren, while Kirito, Agil, and his group are going to fight the mini boss, the secondary boss, which is Colonel Nato. But then the Legend Braves Orlando speak up and say, hey, we didn't come here to fight a bunch of minions and do mop-up work. We came to fight the boss. And Lind is obviously annoyed that these newbies, who are not only lower level but new to the front lines, stepping in, but he says, fine. The Legend Braves can take on part of the boss. They can take on General Baron with us. And the reason that he's allowing this under Kirito's logic is that the main thing against these 2 bosses that's going to be a problem is that you need good armor that can withstand their hits, as well as stop the paralysis that they will inflict on you with their attacks. That's the main problem with this boss, is that he has paralyzing attacks that he uses with like his hammer or his weapons or his stomps. So that's what really dangerous about him. So the Legend Braves, with their armor, which is really shiny and showing off how much more buffs that their armor has because of all the money they've spent on it. All the money they've made from their scam has allowed them to really buff up their weapons and their armor especially. So they're able to use it at full capacity against this general and this colonel. So they go into the battle. Everything seems to be going according to the guide, according to plan. It's going perfectly fine. And then, just as they get Colonel Nato and General Baron, they get Colonel Nato down to the last health bar. They get General Baron down to, I believe, the last third of his health. When Kirito notices that they have a lot of players that have been paralyzed and are doing pot rotations. And he goes over to Lind while Asuna, Agil, and his group hold off the Colonel Nato by themselves. And Lind basically covers up his emotions and says, "What do you want?" And Kirito says, "Listen, we've got a lot of paralyzed people over there. If it keeps going, we might have to retreat." And Lind's like, "Well, we're almost halfway through the boss. Like, if we retreat now, we might not have a better chance." And then behind them, they hear Kibao say, "Well, what if one more person gets paralyzed as we fall back?" And they all agree, if another player gets paralyzed, we'll retreat. And Kirito goes back to fighting with Asuna, lets them know what's going on. And just as they're about to finish off the colonel, they see that another 5 people have gotten back into the fight. So the number of players has decreased from being paralyzed. But then Asuna makes a remark. It's a little weird. The first boss on the first floor was a lord. And now we're fighting a colonel and a general. So why aren't they more highly ranked? And then comes the true boss of the second floor. The general and the colonel were just the starting act. What comes out is King Asteros, a 6-horned, like 12 to 14 foot monster, Tauros, with a crown on his head. And lightning attacks. He has a lightning breath attack. And so Kirito very quickly, using all of his skills, his sword skills, his martial arts skills, gets the last attack on the colonel, goes after General Baron, gets the last attack on that as well, very quickly, but is not in time to really stop King Asteros from doing a lot of damage. He paralyzes Lind, Kibao, Kirito, and Asuna with his breath attack. And just as it looks like they're about to get stomped, literally, Kirito sees a light fly through the room and hit the Asteros crown, knocking him back and stopping his breath attack again. And everybody turns to the front of the room, and they see that it's Nezha who has shown up in his armor and carrying the weapon that Kirito gave him. Kirito had given him a weapon called a chakra, which, if you think about Xena the Warrior Princess, if you're familiar with that, it's a circular disc with a leather handle on it that when you throw it, it will hit its target and boomerang back to you. And the only way to use that is to have the throwing knife skill and the martial arts skill, which Kirito already has and got. And so Nezha, in exchange for giving up blacksmithing, went to the martial artist quest and had to break the rock. And finally, after 3 days, it seems he finally did. He wasn't in time to make it to the boss floor right away for the beginning of the raid, but he runs into Argo, who had just finished all the other quests at the labyrinth floor, where she realizes that the king, Asteros, is the real act of the second floor boss, and that there's a way to beat him, which is to hit his crown just as he's about to launch his attack. And Nezha finds her there. She can't send an instant message to the raid because they're in the dungeon. It won't reach them. So between her speed and Nezha being able to use his chakram, they managed to get through to the boss floor just in time to save everybody. So Argo says, I'll tell you what, I'll sell you the information to beat this guy for the low, low price of nothing. So Lind and Bao decide to continue the fight. Even though they were nearly killed, they decide we're going to keep going. And they do. They keep using Nezha to draw away the boss and then to hit him with their attacks. But the people who really stand out in this fight is not Nezha, nor is it Kirito in the beginning. It is the Legend Braves who, despite all the paralysis attacks that the king hits them with, they are able to withstand it thanks to their armor. And they're able to keep hacking away at him even as he's just using all these paralysis attacks. But Kirito and Asuna decide, you know what, we don't want them getting all the glory. And we don't want them getting that last attack bonus that will increase their chances on the front line. Because they've done all the scamming. So Kirito and Asuna go in and attack. And before the Legend Braves can get the last attack, guess who gets it? That's right. Kirito gets the last attack. As always. He got 3 last attacks in one boss fight. At first, everybody's celebrating another victory, but with no casualties. They had lost Diavel in the first battle. They lost no one this time. And Nezha approaches Kirito and Asuna saying, thank you, I was able to be a warrior at least once. And then Argo is left. I don't think she's really wants to be involved in this. But Shivata of the DKB and one of his other teammates, as well as somebody from the ALS, confront Nezha. And they're like, you were that blacksmith, weren't you? And Nezha puts his weapon on the ground and bows before them on the ground. He kneels and puts his head down on the floor. And he admits to scamming them. He admits it. But he doesn't reveal his friends, the Legend Braves, who are right there, over there. Instead of saying that he bought them armor, he says he spent all the money on luxury hotels and all-you-can-eat buffets. And one of the other players is like, how dare you? Do you know what it's like seeing your favorite sword broken into pieces? My friends had to loan me money and help me get an upgrade and redo quests just so we could get a decent weapon. Do you know what it's like seeing your favorite weapon destroyed? You wasted our time, you wasted our money, so you could have a feast. And everybody's like, how dare you? He's a criminal, blah, 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 blah. He should die when somebody brings it up. But then Lind comes forward and he says, the fact that your cursor is green means that you didn't commit a criminal act. But that just means that your criminality is even worse. So, you need to atone. And you're going to atone. And it looks like Lind is going to tell him he's going to help them make money, that he's going to help them in some way, that he's not going to die. But then somebody from the ALS, who had also screamed at Kirito in the original Floor 1 boss raid, calling him a cheater and a beater, and accusing Argo, this guy steps forward again and says, no, he didn't just cost us time and money. Another player, he scammed, got a lower weapon, and got killed when he could have handled them with his own weapon. He's a PKer. And all at once, everybody's like, oh my god, he's a player killer. He got another player killed because of his scam. There's no way you can bring back the dead. You can't apologize for that. And so, Nezha says, I will pay the price. And somebody says, then pay the price. And there's a mob mentality going on. They're ready to kill Nezha. And the Legend Braves has stayed back. They've been whispering with each other, and they're not doing anything. And then Orlando steps forward with the other Legend Braves and pulls out his Anneal Blade, just like Kirito has. And Kirito is basically like, no way. He's about to pull his sword. Asuna's going to join him, despite him not wanting her to. And then Kirito hears Orlando kind of whisper, I'm so sorry, Nezuo. And he puts his sword on the ground next to Nezha. And then he and the other Legend Braves get on the ground, put their heads forward, and they say, we made him do this scam. We're all guilty. And so at that point, Kirito is no longer worried. What happens is that the 6 players admit to what they did. The 6 Legend Braves admit to it. And now, because they can be paid back by auctioning off their armor to the players that are there at the boss raid, they can actually pay back the victims that they've scammed. And any extra money will go to a fund to buy potions for the next raids. So Lind and Kimbao have kind of agreed that they're going to let the Legend Braves keep a minimal amount of their money and armor so that they can try and level up more. But they're going to do it at a much slower pace now, and they're also going to have this hanging over their heads. But they're not going to get killed. As for the player that Joe or the ALS player says that they got killed, they offer to go and apologize to his friends, and he backs down and he says, "Oh, it was just a rumor I heard." So Kirito and Asuna, since none of the armor will work with them, Lind asks them to go and open the 3rd floor gate. And so the book ends with Kirito and Asuna asking, "Did you get all the last attacks?" And he's like, "Oh wait, here's the door." So I know this was a very long video, but this chapter had so much in it. I'll be very honest, I actually like it a lot more than I like the first floor. The first floor is good, don't get me wrong, but the second floor has so much more players' dynamics and gaming aspects. Like, you get upgrade attempts, you get ingots, and how to make swords a part of your soul, how to keep the soul of your sword, how the blacksmithing scam worked, how the players' social dynamics are going, and you get the precursor, I'm absolutely certain of this, to Laughing Coffin, the Black Poncho. I am absolutely certain that that is Poe, Prince of Hell, because he is damn smart and damn reckless and charismatic. So that was the book. I mean, I absolutely advise you to read it. It is absolutely good, absolutely great. I know. That's the second floor of Aincrad, Part 2 of Progressive Volume 1, sorry. And, well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know it was extremely long. Take care, my wolf pack.